Hello everyone, I'm Jordi. This is the title of my presentation. Hopefully you know about event storage, or I will try to talk about event storage. I would say also I'm a senior software engineer and architect. I'm working now in Dorna Sports, which is a company organizing the World Championship of motorbikes and the whole motorbikes competitions. That's my contact information. As I said before, this is about how could we recover information about our domain, our application, using the information we stored previously in our event storage, right? And first of all, what are events? Events are representations of facts, meaning that facts happen in reality, and events are a representation of that facts in the language our domain understands, the ubiquitous language. For instance, if we have a subscription of a user subscribed event will represent the fact that happened, that particular user fulfilled the information in our subscription form successfully, and after that he was or she was signed up in our company as a subscriptor. Since we are dispatching an event whenever this happens, we might say that every subscription or new subscription fact is stored in our event storage. Since we have this event, we might do some things on them. For instance, we might trigger a command to write a new line in a schedule, and when the last day the subscription allows the user to enter in our service, a fair warning email would be sent to that user. We might do this because we are consuming this event months later, for instance. A renew subscription command is another different command that we might trigger whenever the subscription period ends and we want this user to automatically renew a subscription. You might use events to trigger commands, to call through these commands application services or domain services, so you might do a lot of things thanks to the fact that you have an event flowing throughout the whole domain. Yes. It is important to know that events refer to things that happened in the past. No matter if it's in the immediate past, that is today, or months before, and they might trigger actions in the future. But what about state? I don't know if every one of you know about state. State is when we summarize information we have in the event storage to have some insight, some knowledge. I would show you an example right now, but keep in your minds that states are stuck on a particular moment in time, meaning that different moments in time might represent different states of every collection of properties we are using to produce that state. You might think a state like, for instance, a report. You might think a state, for instance, as a value, meaning that you might say state is anything that give us knowledge about our domain. Hopefully it's an example which is qualifying. Imagine the inventory, which is the economic value of all the items we own at any particular date. Imagine any company that has storage and they have items there. If they own them, they have to put this information in their balance sheet, right? I don't know if you know something about accounting, but you have different methods of produce that economic value for items. This is another example. Imagine we have 3 items in our warehouse. Provided we have these units and this is the acquisition price we have for every item, we might produce this value, which is the economic value of that item. The second one, or the third one, and this is the sum. So what we are saying is that this is the economic value of all the items we have in our warehouse. It's that this, the list of items we have which, with their values, is a state, right? If we dispatch 1 unit, this value will change, and so the state will change. If nothing happens for 3 days, for instance, because the company is closed, the state stays the same, right? So this way we have like a report of how is our inventory. Business people is used to understand more this about the inventory than any other information we might provide, for instance, a query of a database. That's another view of the same state. In this case, it's just the economic value summary. This is an indicator. You might publish this indicator in a dashboard, for instance. You might even put it there in a panel or a TV. Imagine we are the state of the number of failures of people trying to log in our system. The number of people who is trying to log in our system and is failing is another state. It's what we think, what we see in fact in every company which is in the cloud today. Well, remember that since nothing changes a state if there's no event happening, states are not snapshots. You might have a photograph of your inventory every 5 minutes, and if no new unit come in and no unit come out, the state is the same. But we might think of more complicated states. Whenever we have a state that we define which spreads throughout several bounded contexts, we might say it's global. Why is important the difference between local and global? Why is important that we are crossing different bounded contexts? Because when you are using different bounded contexts, as Aleix said before, the meaning of the entities or the properties you are using might change. So you would probably need to translate them, or to map them, or to do complex things just to produce these states. The problem is that business people is used to this kind of states. The common example is accounting. I don't know if you have contact with finance people, but a balance sheet or a profit and losses report collects information of everything that has an economic impact on your company. So it's a global state. I brought here different examples. For instance, is a customer profitable at this particular moment in time? To answer this question, we need to know a lot of things. We need to know the cost we had to keep this customer, and the money we collect from him or from her in this case. This means sales and the parts of the company that provide services to customers. So we have different bounded context here. Imagine we have another question. Is the customer active at this moment? We need to provide a definition of what we consider as an active user. A user that just logged in today, in the last week, in the last month. Another question. Is she in debt at this particular moment? Meaning he has bills to pay? Or are we in debt with her? For instance, if we are Amazon and someone bought something to us and we collect the money but we don't deliver the item. These different definitions of state are common in companies. We have storage, for instance, and they want to see in a dashboard, in a TV panel, for instance, how the state changes during the day, or during the week, or during the month. The problem is, provided we have everything in our event storage, we should be able to recover any state, right? Because we have all the information. Remember that events map reality in our domain, so we have data. States are supposed to provide insight, to provide knowledge from this data. If we have every event in our storage, we should be able to provide any state in any particular moment in time whenever it's requested. In the case of the inventory, if we dispatch a unit received event every time a new unit comes in our warehouse, and a unit dispatch event whenever a unit comes out of our warehouse, we should be able to produce the inventory we saw before any date. Just need to summarize the economic value of everything we have in our warehouse at that particular moment in time. Problem is, in order to be able to do this, we need to have every unit received and every unit dispatch events in our event storage, which is a problem because if the company is quite old, you probably were not dispatching events from the first day of the company. So you have events, for instance, from last year or last 2 years. We might fix this problem dispatching a special event, an initial state event, saying, okay, we started dispatching events today. The inventory today was this collection of data, so we might dispatch a specific event for that initial state. If you are, for instance, implementing an event-based application which is supposed to replace a legacy application, you probably have a database in that legacy. You might want to start your new application from a specific moment in time. You might provide an initial state event in your event storage, and from that moment on, collect new states and produce anything that you want from that particular moment without losing the history. Not the detail, just the moment in time that you start, right? But something happens as well. You might have units lost or stolen, or you wrongly counted them. People in companies used to correct wrong information in the database they have. So you probably need to produce new events when this happens. The problem is here. In your event storage, you have the information you know now about your application or your domain now, but times goes on. you might find out that something that you thought it was in some particular situation, for instance, you have 5 units of one item, was wrong. How do you introduce that new information about the past in your event storage? I don't know if you know that event storage, usually, or at least in our company, is implemented using Apache Kafka, for instance, which is a database where you cannot dispatch events in the past. So how do you correct yourself if you cannot change the past producing events referring to that particular moment? That's the fallacy. Why a fallacy? Because we are, or I don't know if you have experience with attending to event storages conferences, but people usually is told that, speakers told people that you, provided you have events referring to everything that's happening in your domain, you could be able to recover any moment just having your event storage from moment zero and rerun every event you have there. But what happens when this happens? The information you had in the past about that moment is different of the information you have now about the same moment in the past. Which information you should use? I wrote here 2 different options to try to fix this problem. I guess this problem is not obvious for anyone who is not using events in your domain as a way of introducing information in your system using commands or services that react to events. People is used to use actions from users. For instance, a user logged in, a user signed up, a user clicked on a button and something happened. But whenever you are dispatching events, you are introducing a synchronicity in your system. So you are able to make things happen in a different moment in time without coupling that actions to the user in this case, for instance. If you implement this more and more, you end with a system with hundreds or thousands of events being dispatched in any service you have, just to communicate information about facts happening that might or might not be consumed by other services. Microservices architecture, in particular, is quite common to use events because it's a way to make things happen without coupling microservices among them, right? So this problem is quite common when companies are being using events for quite a long time, like months. How could we try to recover a past state using information that we know now about that moment? Well, the first option is to send new events which refer to past facts. What does it exactly mean? It means that a new event occurring now has information in its payload changing something that happened in the past. The problem with this is that from an operational point of view, even if you want to recover a state of the 21st of January 2018, you would need to run all the event storage until now, because some events in October this year correct something referring to the last year. So this means that you have to, whenever the times goes on, you have more and more need of operational time to produce a new state. Where should we storing these events? Should we pervert the purity of our event storage? Suppose that the truth of our domain is here. If everything happening in your domain is in an event storage, and all the services that you have in your domain respond somehow to that event, the truth about everything is in the event storage. So this should not be corrupted. If we are introducing new events, we might want to put them in a separate secondary event storage, which could be good from also the operational point of view. A second tactic that some people uses is called casting, because it refers to changes in the schema of the events. You know that events usually have like a header or a metadata collection of information referring to the event itself, and the business information that is in its payload. We might need to change the properties, or to add new properties, or to change the information of the properties in the payload. This means that we need to change that schema. If we use this, we might also use this tactic to transform events in the past with the information that we have now about them. The good point of this is that we are open to produce every transformation we need. Summary. I hope that anyone using events in their application knows about this problem. Otherwise, you will find it in the future. Events represent facts, meaning we are representing reality in our domain language. States is a way of summarize that information and transform it into knowledge. And that knowledge is has any form. As I said before, it might be a report of the finance or of the wrong states in your entity, or it might be financial information, everything that is collected from your data, your raw data in the event storage, introduces something that the business person may understand is a state. And this is referring always to a specific date in time, since information about that moment in time is only collected from the information we got then. Anything that changes that information that we had in the past is a problem. How could we fix that problem? I presented two different tactics. The first one is to dispatch new events correcting information we had in the past. This has an operational trade-off, which is that whenever you want to rewind your event storage and rerun every event that you have there, you cannot stop until now, even if you are trying to recover a state far in the past. And another option that you have is transform events on recovery, which is far more easier to do, but also have the problem that you need to know how every transformation has to be. And that's all. I don't know if it's something interesting or not. If any one of you have any comment or question, now it's the moment. any one of you using events or event sourcing in your applications? You, just you.
Sure. Well, to make the obvious question, what would you recommend?
For me, dispatch events in the past is wrong, because you are like transforming information of the past in a way that it's uncontrollable. It's impossible to control when something would change. So I would say transform. The problem with this is that business people wants you to produce the right information anytime. Accounting, for instance, has rules. Whenever you are changing, for instance, the accounting state of your company, you cannot do it anytime. You cannot change the financial information of your company of 2016, for instance. It's forbidden by law. So they have rules to avoid transform information that might be wrong in a far past. And I think that we should also apply something similar in our applications. I don't know if any one of you is using microservices, but if you are doing it, it's quite complex to control when an event is consumed. The problem is that you might have 5 different microservices consuming in a different moment in time the same event. If you change that information, who is consuming that new event? Everyone also? Every service also? From the operational point of view, this introduces a very big complexity, because everything that you are doing now might be changed in 5 minutes. You should be aware of that change. Which changes you should be aware of? It's a lot of information that you need to put in your code. So I would say transform, because it's more focused on any change you need to provide your code with. I don't know if it's.
When you say that the business asks for information at any point, do you mean that when you want to deliver this, you are always doing a query to are you producing it through the events? Do you have kind of data warehouse? It's something that, I mean, is the data already produced in some place where you could query this with the time already took in account, or you are just replaying events anytime?
The problem is the architecture. If you have an application that has access to every data in your domain right now, for instance, you have a monolith, I mean, you have a very big application which has access to everything in your database, you shouldn't be using events. The problem is when you want to use new architectures like microservices or serverless, or if you want even to implement integration with third-party applications seamlessly, I mean, statefully. I mean, one way of doing that is decoupling. And one way of decoupling is producing independent services working alone and communicating, for instance, using events. The problem with this is that usually every microservice has its own database. If you want to produce a report of the kind you're mentioning, if you have just one database, just collect information there. But if you have to report something which information comes from 5 separated databases, which might not be available right now because of any infrastructure problem or pitfall, people usually tries to use events to provide information anywhere is needed. I mean, it's like to have a spread database, because events are available for anyone, any service might use on the same event are there. I don't know if I'm clear. I mean, when you have For instance, in our case, when we are using microservices, we might have, at right now, that we are just implementing them, 15 different services, which one of them has their own database. They are working, I mean, they are doing their job. If you want to report something which collects information from those 15 databases right now, you might ask them, the 12 of them, sorry, the 15 of them, or you might use a representation of that data in the form of events on your event storage. For instance, you also said a data warehouse. We are using a data warehouse as well. The point is that events allow you to spread the information whenever is useful, and you don't know when. That's a very big feature that microservices allow you to do, which is great because you like decouple the data from a particular database. I don't know how many of you are using this kind of decoupling the database. People usually decouple services but not the database. Like imagine the situation when you want, for instance, that use 15 different databases. It's hard to collect information anytime from all of them consistently. That's events are a solution for that basis.
When I work with event storage, so if I'm moving from Microsoft-based architecture for a Microsoft architecture using event storage, my state will rely in the database or in the event storage. Because, for example, I have a representation of my clients. I have all the data of my clients in my Microsoft client domain. And now I have a lot of events related with this client. This is stored where? In the data warehouse, or it's a separate database just for events?
Yes, people used to query the database anytime for collect all the information about an entity, for instance, customer. If you have everything related to your customer in the same database, you just need to inner join tables.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is when you decouple your architecture, that power is lost. It's impossible to do the same. Mm-hmm. One way of provide you with the ability to concentrate information about the customer when you want in one point, the application that has to produce that report is consuming events because they are there. As I said before, anything happening in your application should dispatch an event if it's related to the domain, and that domain event is available.
But where I store
in the
event
storage?
In a different storage. It's not in the same.
You should keep them in an event storage. For instance, we are using Apache Kafka for that,
mm-hmm.
but you might using Amazon. Yes, I mean it's up to you. The good thing about that services is that they are cheap to maintain. I mean, they are available. They have very big performance, so you might consume from them anytime you want, which is a good way of have the information spread in the system.
But you can keep this data there for a long time, because at least I saw that you have you can keep the information 1 year or 2 years.
It's configurable. For instance, in our case, we said that every domain event is stored permanently. I mean, it's never deleted.
And when the server gets full, you just move the data from NTFS.
Yes. I mean, it's another benefit of working with the cloud, that you just provide information and then the cloud handles. So yes, And by default, Apache Kafka, for instance, deletes information after some time. I think it's 2 days. 2 days, I think it's 2 days. But you might say, no, I want to keep this event forever, and it's not a problem. In fact, it's the good point of this.
That is a real one.
Given the high amount of events that you might have stored in your storage, isn't trying to get this kind of record of something may take a high amount of times?
Oh yes.
When you're trying to retrieve some kind of state or something?
Oh yes, but the good point of these states is that usually they are not required every moment. I mean, for instance, if you want to produce the inventory, you might have 1 day, 2 days, 3 days to do it. I mean, no one in finance is so crazy to ask you for the inventory every 5 minutes. I mean, it's crazy.
So you will try to have that data prepared for whoever needs it. You will have some kind of
Yes. Yes, it's like a cultural shift. I mean, as I said, people is used to have the ability to query the database anytime they want. But if you need to produce a report which has a very big load on your service, you usually schedule the report production, for instance, to do it like night or anytime. And the problem is, if you have the information spread over a lot of databases, this is completely, well, it's very hard to handle. It's also, the consistency is very hard to guarantee. So if you have events, you might save part of them in a data warehouse, for instance, which is a good tool to produce reports, or you might transform them on demand on another service just for that. So the system which is keeping your online operations and the database of those operations is not affected by the production of that report, which is something that was happening in the past. I mean, commonly applications don't allow you to produce reports when they are running other interactive operations, which is good for that operational point of view, to have separated services to produce reports.
Okay. Thank you.
So,
Yeah.
just to understand the use case that you were explaining on your, the company that you were working on, if I understand correctly, you have event storage and you have also a database, or it's just event storage?
Well, you have databases for every microservice.
So the event storage, it's just Kafka and a global one for each topic.
Yes.
You have the event.
Yes, for instance, whenever a user signs up, so he's a new customer, for instance, a new customer event is dispatched, and that event is stored in Apache Kafka, as well as is consumed by any other service which is subscribed to that kind of event.
So when you want to reconstruct the state,
Yep.
you don't create snapshots at any given point in time, and you push that in the event storage, and we keep track of the snapshots for reconstructing. I mean, I'm just thinking about performance. So if you have an event storage with all the events, and you also push snapshot, then if you keep track of snapshots and you want like the last 2 years, you go to the snapshot and you just pull everything that was.
Yes. I don't know if you are used to Apache Kafka, for instance. You have they have a particular tool which is I mean, it's like a snapshot which continues from the point that you started it. It's not like a picture of my current event storage and just store some URLs. It's not that way that it works. The good news is that Apache Kafka is very, very performant. I mean, is crazy how they built it.
Yeah, I'm just asking because if you perform millions of operations per day, and if you want a report of that in 2 months, it's like
Yes, they don't have. I mean, what they have is like you might have. I mean, it's like a snapshot that you start now, but it's refreshed automatically from then on. So the system keeps it refreshed. The problem, and is what I was trying to show you here, is when the past change, because you started in some moment, and somehow you're considering that the pure first state of your system, which is wrong, because unless you are working in a startup which starts just now, you have history, you have your legacy, you have wrong information, you have something that happened in the past which was not registered in your database correctly. I mean, you have a lot of information which is not consistent right now, so you have to act on them. And these event storage applications like Amazon's One Option or Apache Kafka are not particularly right for that, which is the problem we had, and that's the reason why I had to think about it to find solutions. I understand that if you are not using event storage on grand scale, it's hard to catch up with it, but it's a very big problem. I assure you.